Okay, yes, on Erev Shabbos, we saw Daf Nun Gimel on the base. We had a machloikis. One of the things that a Nazir is metama and would overhead and override besides the Ziris was a piece of an aver that had basar on it. That basar, if it was attached to a live body, would go ahead and regenerate. What happens? The Gemara had a shaila. If let's say it doesn't have basar karoi, you have an aver, and we even metama to mismasa, but do we want to know? It doesn't have basar karoi, so an oil is not matama. We want to know it's matama to masa umaga. That's what we wanted to know. And in speaking with what it doesn't have an etzem kisaira. That was the shaila. So the bone is less than etzem kisaira, and it doesn't have basar karoi, but it had a shem aver. Rabbi Yochanan said it's not matama, and Reish Lakish said it is matama. Rabbi Yochanan says it's not matama, and Reish Lakish says it is matama. So we're questioning the shita of Rabbi Yochanan. We're questioning the shita of Rabbi Yochanan, and we are on Nun Gimel Amid Beis, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines from the bottom. Hi Eva min ameis hechidami. This Eva from the mace, what are we discussing? This Eva from the mace, what are we discussing? Again, if it has the size of etzem kisaira, my time with Rabbi Yochanan. Why Rabbi Yochanan say it's not matama to mismaga? Again, fellas, there's no shaila that tumis oil is out of the picture. Since it doesn't have basar on it, it's not considered an aver, and only an aver for an mace. So what does it have? You have a bone. So Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan says it's not matama of a maga. Now the question is, if it has the size of that bone is the size of a barley seed, a soira, of course it should be matama to mismaga. And if it doesn't have etzem kisaira, my time of Reish Lakish that it is. Again, you don't have basar over here. We're dealing with two types of tumas oil and tumas mace, right? Tumas oil and tumas maga. Tumas oil is out of the pictures. Is once you lose the shem aver, it's out of the picture. It doesn't have basar. So what's the shiloh? Whether etzem with tama maga or not, that should depend upon the size of it. If it's the size of a barley bean, it should be tamei. So why would Rabbi Yochanan say it's not? And if it's not the size of a barley bean, why would Reish Lakish say yes? That's the shaila. It seems to be a pashut shaila. Okay, says the Gemara. I'll tell you. Amalach Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish will tell you the following: La'olam delespe etzem kisaira. La'olam, it does not have an etzem kisaira. It does not have an etzem kisaira. So if it doesn't have etzem kisaira, what's the reason I hold its tummy? Right? What's the reason that I hold its tummy? If the etzem is not the size of a saira, why would I hold its tummy? So the Torah says, the pasuk says in the Torah, V'chol asher yiga al pnei hasadeh, anyone who touches al pnei hasadeh, b'chalel cherev, oy b'meis, oy be'etzem adam, oy be'kaver, yidma shivas yomim. He'll be tamei 7 days. So we're going to dash in this pasuk. What does this pasuk mean? Okay, what does this pasuk mean? The less they have kasaira, so that you should be tamei. Right? Where's the pasuk? The Tanya. And we said now we're going to dash in the pasuk. That means the mace is mutal al hasadeh. It doesn't say the mace is bas sadeh, which is mashma. It's bas sadeh. It's al hasadeh. So it's ala sadeh, zeha mile al pnei mace. That one is the mace is there, and you're mile on top of the mace. So even though it says v'chol yiga, we're going to dash in the Indian tumas oil. This is important. Even though it says lashon negia, the drasha, since it says hasadeh, you're mile on the mace that's on the sadeh. Okay. B'chalel, we say b'chalel cherev. B'chalel, say eva min achai. Another, it's a sheneschalel that it was eva min achai that was obviously ischalel, that it was what? It was the aver was disattached, obviously from the chai, from the person. Hanechla, okay? So the yesh loy lahaloi saruchaloi, and it has basar that if it was connected, it would regenerate. Okay, it's matama to Messiah. Yeah, aver min achai. that if it had enough basar on it to be tamid to Messiah. In other words, this is one of the things stated in the Mishnah, and this is the source. One of the things stated in the Mishnah that would override the Nazir's Naziris was Eivir min Achai, where that basar karoi, and this is the source. Cherev, what does the sword mean? Harizek kechalol. We've come across many times in Shas that a metal kli that touches a mace gets the level of the mace. It becomes an abi abayis hatuma, and it'll be metama to harihu kemes. Cherev, the cherev, harihu kechalol is like the chalol. Yeah, so that's what you learn from chalol. Every chalol. Oibe mace ze eva hanechlal. That's an eva that got cut off from a mace, right? So eva min achai and eva min a mace both will be metama to Messiah, right? And it has enough. Okay. Anyway, I bet Adam. So the etzem adam is a roiva atzamais. Etzem adam, the pasuk when the pasuk says etzem means it's roiva atzamais. That's mitama ba'ayel. Oy bekaver. Ze kaver sasum. It's a kever. It's a grave that you have a cholol that is pesuach tefach ben agag. There's an opening of a tefach between the gag and the wat and the mace, and it's closed on all sides. And in this case, the tumah would go ahead and go out, would expand. Okay, we don't need this, believe it or not. The Amamar, this is just a general idea. Tumah bekas oila. If it's a tefach like this, the tumah goes straight up. V'yaredes. Okay, we don't need this limud. We need the next limud. So this limud, the way we dash in this pasuk, was for tumas oil. We need the next part, which is tumas maga, because again, our sugya, guys, is only dealing with tumas maga because Reish Lakish wants to include an aver that the bone is less than the size of a sa'ira. He wants to include that the bone is less than the size of a sa'ira. Okay. Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, v'ilu gabi negia. When it says the gabi negia regarding the touching the mace, what does it say? Rav Yehuda Tanya. The pasuk says, and now it says, if I read the pasuk to you. V'chol hanagea be'etzem ve'bechalol oy b'meis oy b'kaver ba'etzem ze etzem kisoira ba'etzem is etzem kisoira oy b'chalol ze eva hanichlal, that's an eva that's cut off minachai ve'ein boy lahalas arucha, and it doesn't have basar on it to regenerate, so therefore it would be only tumas maga. Oy b'meis ze eva hanechol min ha-meis, and it doesn't have basar on it, so all of these would be tumas maga. This is a kever before the dibur. Okay, let's hold off on this for a second. We'll get back to it in a second. The bottom line is, hi aver min ames. This aver min ames hechidami. When you said that aver min ames is only mitama tumis maga, what is it speaking about? This aver min ames is only tumis maga. What's it speaking about? Hechidami. If it has the etzem the size of a kasaira, then Haganageya be'etzem. That you will learn out from Haganageya be'etzem. You will need the limud from Aver. Elevada gles be'etzem kasaira. When it says that it doesn't have what, that when the pasuk says that Aver min ha-mes, the pasuk says oy b'mes, and you want to tell me it's Aver min ha-mes, it must be what? That it doesn't have the size of a saira, and nonetheless it's tamid to mismaga. But feel hochi Rabbi Rahman Rabbi. Okay, outside. What's the kasha? We have machloikas between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Let's go over it. You have an eva min ha-meis, right? On this eva min ha-meis, you would have a basar on it, or eva min ha-chai. You'd have basar on it, and the basar is able to regenerate. That would be mitam tumis oil. That's no shaila, that would be mitam tumis oil. What happens, however, on this aver, if you do not have basa that could go ahead and regenerate? Would it be mitamet tumis maga? Oil? No. Would it be mitamet tumis maga? So what do I have? If I don't have meat, what do I have? I have a bone. I have a bone. So what's the Gemara Shaila? If it's the size of a soira, so it's metama etzem kasoira. And if it's not metama the soira, it's not metama. Says Reish Lakish, it's not the size of a soira. It's not the size of a soira. Yet nonetheless, it's tamei. Where do I know that from? I have a pasuk that says, Oy b'meis. Again, going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down in the Gemara. Oy b'meis. It's an aver hanechla min ha-meis. That's an aver that was disattached from the mace, and it doesn't have on it basar. It doesn't have on it basar, correct? So therefore, it must be speaking that has an etzem. And it must be the etzem is not the size of sa'ira. Because if it was the size of sa'ira, that I would learn out from ba'oi be'etzem, right? I would learn that from another source. So l'chayra, you have a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. You see, Reish Lakish has a special source that an aver that got disattached, lost the meat, less than a sa'ira, still in metama tumas maga. And you, Rabbi Yochanan, says it's not. And you, Rabbi Yochanan, would say it's not. Okay? That's the kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. That's the kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, now, what does the Gemara answer? Amalach Rabbi Yochanan, la'olam de ispe. La'olam, it has, la'olam de ispe, it has the size of etzem kesaira. Right? The ispe. It does have the size of what? Of etzem kesaira. If that's the case, what do I need it for? If that's the case, what do I need it for? Right? If that's the case, it's etzem kesaira. Why do I need it for? Why do I need the pasuk zehan ayames? So if I don't need it for maga, because I learned that from the geya be'etzem, nu inyan lemasoy, that an aver from a mace that doesn't have basar on it is at the size of a soira would be metamatum a masa. I would, right? And therefore, if I'm going to use it for that it's metama tumis masa, I would not know necessarily that's metama tumis maga. If the aver inyan tuma is only metama tumis masa, then I don't have a makar for tumis maga of an aver that doesn't have basar on it that's going to regenerate. In other words, you wanted to say this is speaking about an aver that's less than etzem kisoira. I'm telling you, no, it's speaking about an aver that lost its meat, and the etzem is kasayz of ksayra. It is. So what do I need the lima for? To tell me that it's metama tumis masa. To tell me it's metama tumis masa. But einachinami, if it was a case of a aver that was not the size of etzem ksayra, it would not be metama. It was aver that's not the size of etzem ksayra, it would not be metama. Now going back, what's that lifnei adibu? What is that going on? So there's a long taisus over here. It's a long taisus over here that it spends time discussing whether the tumah of a goy is metama tumas oil or not. The famous machloikis between the Tanakama and Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon's of the opinion that we're not called Adam. We're not called Adam. We are called Adam, and they're not called Adam. So those Torahs are Adam tama ba'oil. So if you have to be called an Adam, be tama tumas oil. So lefnei adibur, if it's going on what? On the goyim, so it's no shaila. So the answer would be it's going on Yisrael before the dibur. Now Yisrael before the dibur until Matan Torah, not necessarily would be metama tumas what? Tumas oil. That would be the pshat. It's a very interesting, Tosfos speaks in a very interesting Gemara in that famous Gemara in Baba Basra. Guys, you might remember this Gemara. Rav Bana, he was going ahead and he was going around Eretz Yisrael, and he was putting lime by the Kfarim in order to ensure that the people if they would chas v'shalom would not be over on tumas oil for the kahanim. He got to Ma'aras HaMachpelah, and he found Eliezer Avram right outside, and he asked him what's Avram doing. He says Avram is lying in the chest of Sarah. A really weird Gemara that needs a lot of beer, but that's beyond the scope of the share at this point in time. The only shaila is if it's before Matan Torah. So why would Rabbi Noah have to go ahead and make a tzion around the Ma'aras HaMachpelah? If you're telling me it's before Matan Torah, and before Matan Torah, right, why would you have to go ahead and do it? They would have done any Yehudim. So look at Tosfos' final beautiful teretz. Look at Tosfos says. The Tosfos is the second Tosfos, Oy B'Kever. Right before the end of Tosfos, Ella, A few lines up, it says, Hariva, the Shapik Harya Adam Arishain. Adam Rishon was called Adam. Avram Adam Agadol V'Anakim. So l'chayre, they were even for Mount Torah. What were they called? They were called Adam. So even later of Shimon, who says that when they're not called Adam, we are called Adam. The Avos and Adam would be called Adam. Okay, that would be a mahalach to answer that question. Okay, so we end the machlokes. We started a new Gemara. Okay, now what did the Mishnah say? You spritz day 3 and day 7. This Seiser. Okay, if you look at the Mishnah, let's look at the Mishnah again. We're ending a long Mishnah from Memtes. You say this to the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? The last line of the Mishnah. Memtes on the days. This is the second to the last line. Al Eila Nazim Megaleach. Umaze b'shlishi yishvi. Hira paraduma shvitz on day 3 and day 7. B'seiser es hakoidmin. It would go ahead and override any days of Naziris that they had counted. It would counteract those days. They wouldn't count. The Edom Maschil live nice, and they don't begin counting their new Naziris, Ella ad until Shei Toher, or maybe as Kabbanaisav, until they become Tor and being their Kabbanas. So here's the question. The Tyra takes place on day 7, and bringing the Kabbanas takes place on day 8. So do they start counting before that or not? We had a machloikis between Rebbe Eliezer earlier for Daf Yudches. We had a machloikis between Rebbe Eliezer and the Chachamim. Rebbe Eliezer said miyad on day 7, and the Chachamim said what on day 8. Says the Gemara. Iboilahu hadik tani ad sheyitoher b'shvi koi ad over shemesh umani Rebbe Eliezer he. It's going on Shvi and until Her Shemesh, it's Rabbi Eliezer. It's going on day 8. Until he brings his kabbanas. So I'll be counting on day 7 on day 8. Umani Rabbanan he. Tashma, again, the machlokes earlier in Daf Yoches. Tashma, Midiktani Seifa, the next Mishnah, guys. Look at the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah, Nundalid, right below. Go to the last line of the page. Al elu eina nazim begaleach. The nazim won't take a haircut. Umazeh b'shlishi shvi amid days. Ve'ena sois es hakoidmin. It doesn't counteract the previous days. Umaschelu moina miyad, and he starts counting immediately. So we can make an inference. Dafka here you eat on day 7 immediately. Mashma, the Mishnah before was day 8. Right? Dafka this Mishnah, when there's no karbanis, then you count immediately on day 7, miyad. But when it says miyad there, it's mashma. What are we discussing? Our Mishnah is going according to Rabbanon, and you're going to start counting after you bring your karbanis on day number 8. So let's see it inside. Tashma, Midiktani say for the next Mishnah, maskul umoina miyad. He starts counting immediately. Harei shemai achi yitoyer achi yabi karbanaisav. It means till he brings his karbanis. Umani, and who's the Tan? Rabbanan, it's Rabbanan. The Ami Naziris the Tahira at Shmini Loichayel. The Naziris Tahira does not chal until day 8. So he's not going to start counting until the next day. Okay. The next Mishnah, fellas, is the inverse of the previous Mishnah. The previous Mishnah was discussing the Naziris, the Tumah that would override his Naziris. Here's Tumah, even Tumah that has to do with a mace, some of it, that will not override Naziris. The days won't count to his Naziris, but they won't counteract previous days. If another counted 20 days, those 20 days would count, right? Those 20 days would count. Okay, says the Mishnah. We'll see in the Gemara what that means. A base of pras is if you're buried in a field and you went ahead and you plowed the field, you say 100 amas from the kever would be tummy. This is tummy d'Rabbanan. The Eretz Ha'amim, this is important for our discussion. Going into Eretz Ha'amim, the Chachamim were goyzer 80 years before the Churban Bayis. They made a gezerah on Eretz Ha'amim, the oil on Eretz Ha'amim. Okay, they made earlier, even before Yosef ben Yezer, Yosef ben Yisroda, they were goyzer on the gush, and they were goyzer 80 years. They even goyzer on the oil, as we'll see on the air, on the avir. So these, if you contract tumah from these are all tumas of mace, guys. These are tumas of mace. All these are tumas of mace. Nonetheless, they're not going to override your naziris. Okay, the very machloikis Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam throughout Shas According to Rashi, if you ever been to Eretz Yisrael, you see that they have stones on top of the grave. They have stones on top of the grave. The stone on top of the grave is the goylel. The stones that are supporting the goylel are called the doifik. So they're directly there. Rabbi Tam says the goylel is the matseva, and the doifik are the bones that are supporting the matseva. Okay, the bones that are supporting the matseva. That's machlokes throughout Shas between Rashi and Rabbi Tam. Urevias dam and revias dam, revias dam as opposed to chatzi loig, chatzi. This is revias loig as opposed to chatzi loig. This is not like Rabbi Akiva; it's like the Chachamim. And the girsa over here, Tosfos has a different girsa. Revias dam v'oil v'roiva bat samais, right? Even though the revias dam is metama b'oil, the nazir is not going to be megaleach on him, right? The nazir is not going to be megaleach. So the revias dam the oil v'roiva bat samais, even though it's tummy tumis oil, nonetheless, what the nazir is not. Allah Sinai by roiva at samais that the nazir is not going to be, even though he's tummy tumis oil, he's not going to override his naziris. The kelim anogeim b'meis. Okay, this is important. Like, not that they all are, but this. Let's say you have a mace and a metal kli touches a mace. So we know the metal kli is an aviyah v'satoma. What happens if a wooden kli touches the mace? So the wooden kli is an avatoma. What happens if a person touches the avatoma? He's a rishon. He would contract tuma. So therefore, there is no spritzing day 3 and day 7 on this guy. Guys, you hear? The wooden kli is an av. An av has the capacity of tama adam v'kelim. So if, even though the kli has a din of tamei mace, but it's not the mace itself, it's an av. If it touches an adam, he's only tumas erev. He goes to the mikvah and he's at full yoim. He doesn't have to have day 3 and day 6, 7 spritzed on him. Good. Ubmei sifroi, ubmei gomroi. Okay, we did this a little bit. Mitzayra, guys. Let's go through Mitzayra outside the beginning. We're going to see it through a lot of times. A Mitzayra would be a Mitzayra muchlet. That means he's a Mitzayra for sure. Goes out three machnes. Remember, he's the only one that leaves all machnes. Shechina Levi of Yisrael. Bada Yeshev chutz lamachne. Kohen comes, checks him out. He's tar from his terrace. 2 birds. One bird you shech. You hold the bird and the live bird. You wave it. You let the live bird go, and then he takes the total body shave. 7 days later, he takes another body shave. On the 8th day, he brings his kabbanis. The days that he's going ahead and that he is a mitzayra, al kol bimei gomroi. That's when he's mamish mitzayra. He's counting his days of mitzayra. The days that he's counting, the 7 days in between the first body shave and the second body shave, is kol bimei sipuroi. Those days would not count to his naziris. They won't overact. They won't count. In other words, they won't count towards the naziris, but he still would be able to go ahead and be a nazir if he was a mitzayra during this period. Umei sifroi, umei gamroi. Al elu eina nazir megaleach. On these, all the nazir is not going to take a haircut. Umazeh, well, obviously it's not going on mei sifroi migroi. He's going to take a haircut for his fact that he's mitzayra. He's going to take a haircut from the fact that he's a mitzayra. Umazeh b'shlishu b'shvi. Now, that's not going on mitzayra, guys, and that's also not going on nageya b'meis, b'keli, right? That's not going there because he's not tummy there. So again, it's not going. These words, Masa Shlishi Shvi, clearly is not going on the whole Mishnah. Good. Mitzayra doesn't need it, guys. Mitzayra is not tummy meis, and nageya b'kli, since it's a kli, that's what is an avatuma. It's only tumas erev, so it's also not going that as well. Okay, Amid Beis. Any days he counted before will not go ahead and be overridden. Umaskil umayna miyad. As soon as he finishes, he starts counting immediately. He doesn't have to wait till day 8. He can go mitzayra day 7, starts counting immediately. The carbon ain't light, and there's no carbon tuma. And the emes amru, that means halacha l'mash misinai, guys. The emes amru means halacha l'mash misinai. You may hazava if during the days of the naziris he becomes a zav. You may hasgera shal mitzayra, or during the days of his naziris he is a suffix mitzayra that the kohen has to decide. That's called mitzayra musker. We had this in Masechta Megillah. Ein bein mitzayra muchlet mitzayra musker. We explained there a musker is the kohen doesn't know for sure. He has to ascertain. We put him away for 7 days, and those days are called haskara. The days that he's away do count towards the naziris. So the days of zav count towards naziris, and days of heska count towards the naziris. They would count towards his naziris. Okay, long Mishnah. Okay, let's focus. We'll go piece by piece. The first part of the Mishnah said that if he's tamei through schachos or prois, what are they? Ve'elohin schachos, ilan hamesech ala aretz. That's a tree that is branching out of the aretz, and underneath one of the branches of the tree is a mace, and the nazir walks, and you're not sure if he walked under there or not. So it's a suffix. So he will be tamei. He will need a spritz of day 3 and day 7 al suffix, but it's not going to override his naziris. The chiddush over here, guys, is this is in B'shus Harabim. We learn in Masechta Soita suffix tamei B'shus Harabim sfeikei tahar. So the Indian nazir were machmir. So the Indian nazir were machmir. But even though suffix tamei B'shus Harabim sfeikei tahar, over here we will be machmir. That's schachos. And and prois are the same thing, except their stones coming out from the wall, like a hacienda type of thing. Stones coming out from there, and there's a mace under him. He doesn't know which one he walked under. He's a suffix, whether he's tummy or not. In these cases, what's going to halacha? The halacha is going to be he will go ahead and he won't override his naziris. Okay, the Eretz Ha'amim. Okay, now Eretz Ha'amim is very interesting. Eretz Ha'amim. This for Bekias purposes, very interesting. Eretz Ha'amim. This is based upon a Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Tesvav and Aleph. There were 3 shlovim, 3 levels of this gezerah of Eretz Ha'amim. Yossi, the famous peer, Yossi ben Yezer Israel, Yossi ben Yochanan Yishalayim, they were geyser tuma suffix al gusha afash al Eretz Ha'amim. In other words, if you walked over the gush or you touched the gush of Eretz Ha'amim, of Chutz La'aretz, the gush means the ground itself, that anyone who touched it, Eretz Ha'amim, or anyone who carried it, and then he touched Truma or Kachim, they would be Asa al Suffolk. In other words, you wouldn't eat them, but you wouldn't burn them. You wouldn't eat them or you wouldn't burn them. And they did not go ahead and be geyser on the airspace at all. There was no geyser on the airspace, just on Tumas Maga, and it was a Suffolk Derabanan, and therefore that was the first geyser of Yosef ben Yisrael, the Yosef ben Yochanan Yishalayim. Now, 80 years before the Bayis Sheni, 80 years before the Bayis Sheni, the next level of increase, that there were geyser also on the airspace, suffix tuma, on the airspace, that if you're mile on the gush, you're tummy suffix. In other words, the first gezerah was only on mago masa of gush. The second one was what? The tumas oil of gush. Third, after the churban in Usha, when the Bezdin came to Usha, they made a takana that the gush is metama tumas vadai. So therefore, if you touched it or you carried it, you would burn the truma or you burn the kachin. Tumas vadai. Good, you burn vadai. But however, the avi remained tumas suffix. Okay, that remained tumas suffix. That was tumas oil. That was tumas oil. So again, so it comes out, the last gezerah, guys, was that tumas oil was kind of the Rabbanon, and tumas mago was the Raisa. Okay. There is a machlokes in the Gemara about the ear itself. In other words, when you go into Eretz Ha'amim, if I would go in a box, I would go in a large box, right? A large box that was able to contain 40 saw. That's going to be mafsik between the gush and myself. So in other words, the gush is a din in mace. Just as a mace is a din in mago masa, there would be a din in tumas oil. What happens if I create a barrier between me and the gush? I will be tahar. However, if the airspace itself is tameh, then I will be tameh just entering the airspace, even if I have a barrier. That's the Gemara Shaila. Iboilahu, says the Gemara, Eretz Ha'amim, Mishum Avira Gazru Aleha, or they geyser because of the airspace. Now, guys, this is not tumas oil. This is like, view the airspace like a piece of mace, right? with a geyser on the tumas on the air itself. And again, the nafka mina would be if you would enter the airspace in a shida teva migdal in a box. If it's als gush, you would be tahar. If it's als avir, you'd be tameh. Toshma, umaza b'shlishi v'shvi. Our Mishnah says, eretz amim, you would be shpitz day 3 and day 7. In other words, we went through the Mishnah, fellas. Let's go back to the Mishnah again. Look at the Dalam and Aleph. Aval eschoches v'aproyes ubeis hapras the eretz ha'amim. And at the end of this Mishnah, it said, maza b'shlishi v'shvi. And pashtus that shlishi shvi is going back on the whole Mishnah, even though I showed you it's not. That's going to be the entrance to the teretz. But right now, it's going on the whole Mishnah. Now, if it's geyser al gush, I would understand why it's tameh, because gush is a din of tumas mace. But if you told me they made a gezer in the airspace, they wouldn't geyser that it's like being on a mace. The airspace is tameh, but you would not require a spritz of like tumas mace of para duma water. So, Fred the Gemara, you want to be paisha the shayla? Let's be paisha the shayla. You have a shayla. It's a din in the gush, and in the airspace. L'chayra have a raya from a Mishnah that it's a din in the gush. Umaza b'shlishi b'shvi. V'yam mishum avira. If you tell me it's speaking the gzer in the airspace, lamali. Why would you need a spitz day 3 and day 7? L'chayra has nothing to do with mace. Elolav mishum gusha. It must be al gush. So let's be paisha the shayla. Says the Gemara, la'olam eimulach. I'll tell you mishum avira. It's because of the airspace. Yatame. What about day 3 and 7? When you learn 3 and 7, asha'ara. You learned it what? On the other dinim. You learned it on the other dinim. Meaning, it's going on the prois. It's going on the schachais. It's going on the beis hapras. It's going on the goylil. It's going on the doifik. It's going on the revias dam. It's going on the reivat somas. It's not going on eretz amim. And you know what the raya is, guys? Hanageya b'meis. Hanageya b'meis. If you touch him, the kelim hanageya b'meis. That the keli that touched the mace. We proved that what? It can't be speaking about a metal kli, because the metal kli is like the mace itself. So that would be sois in the naziris. So what's it talking about? Someone who touched a wooden kli that touched the mace. A mace is avi avois. The wooden kli is an av. Person's a rishon. You're not having spritz on him. So just like the day 3 and 7 is not going on, then a kelim nageya b'meis. Din, it's not going on eretz ha'amim, and you have no raya whether it's the avir or the gush. Achnami mistaber midiktani the kelim hanageim b'meis hani kelim b'nei hazah. These kelim are b'nei hazah. They're not b'nei hazah. In other words, they can't create. They themselves, yes, but they themselves can't create b'nei hazah. Alashmami no ashara eretz. When it said day 3 and 7, it was going all the other dinim we mentioned, not on eretz ha'amim. And therefore, you won't be able to be paisha the shayla. Okay, Bez Hashem tomorrow morning. Good to